What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Red Zone DFS College Football Edition for the real week one. Hopefully, you all had a good week last week, week 0, which still blows my mind. We call it week 0, but it is what it is. So before we get into it, please subscribe, hit thumbs up, drop us a comment, leave us a review, tell us how much you hate this. All of it helps, doesn't matter. Like I said, hopefully everybody had a good week last week. I feel like we did all right. I feel like we had a few good calls over here. Caleb Williams was kind of the must play in USC's offense. Zachariah Branch is the one that helped me out quite a bit. That I thought that was a pretty solid call just from the hype of him all off season and as a recruit. Chavon Cordero balled out. He did his job as far as trailing USC and trying to catch up. And then Smoke Harris was a late addition that I dropped into the notes on YouTube on last week's video to add a little bit late. So those guys helped out quite a bit. Unfortunately, Rourke for Ohio kind of killed me in a lot of lineups. He was probably my second highest on quarterback. I thought they were primed to have a good game versus San Diego State. Went down early with an injury, and they were cautious putting him back in. So total bummer, but what are you going to do? That is college football. That is fantasy sports and DFS. So on to next week. So here we go. On to week one. We are talking the DraftKings main slate for Thursday, which will be quite the slate. I'm not sure what madman or madwoman at DraftKings built this slate, but I believe it's 11 games, and we only have spread and odd information on about 4 or 5 of them. So there's a lot of tilted matchups in this one. It's going to be kind of a wild day. I would suggest not going overboard with your bankroll just because, again, this slate is absolutely wild. To give you kind of some perspective, NC State and UConn, we know quite a bit about that. NC State's 14.5-point favorite. UCF, probably the biggest spread favorite on the slate that we know about. 37-point favorite playing Kent State. Florida goes to Utah as the matchup of the night in terms of real football. That spread has dropped. Utah is now a 4.5-point favorite, and reports just dropped that Cam Rising is not expected to play on Thursday. So prepare accordingly. Nebraska goes to Minnesota, where Minnesota is a 7-point favorite. PJ Fleck has a whole new group there at quarterback, running back, and so on, as well as Nebraska is a totally new regime coming out of there. So that's going to be kind of an interesting game. And then we go to some of the more lopsided ones. So buckle up. Elon goes to Wake Forest, no line on that game. Rhode Island to Georgia State, no line. St. Francis University, where I could not tell you where they were located before this video, goes to Western Michigan. South Dakota at Mizzou. Arkansas Pine Bluff goes to Tulsa. NCA&T plays UAB, and Trent Dilfer taking over that program. And Southern Utah pays a visit to Arizona State in the desert, with Kenny Dillingham taking over that program, fresh off their recent bowl ban, and a new quarterback in Jalen Rashada taking over. So that is quite the slate that DraftKings is throwing at us. Let's do our best to kind of go through, or at least from my perspective, how I'm going to approach this wacky slate. I am going to try to stick with what I know. I do not know a ton about, I don't know, 6 or 7 of these schools, and it's even harder to find information on them. Elon, Rhode Island, St. Francis University, South Dakota, Ark Pine Bluff, NCA&T. It's hard to even find depth charts for these guys, let alone who is going to be playing, what kind of system are they running, who transferred in, who transferred out. So my suggestion and how I'm approaching this is I'm going to stick with what I know. And I know a lot of these games are going to be lopsided. That's okay. And I'm going to stick with the games that I feel confident about based on depth charts and based on off-season reports that I can get information on. And if somebody from St. Francis or Ark Pine Bluff or NCA&T beats me, hey, I'm going to tip my cap and move on to the next one. It just is what it is. I'm not going to try to pretend like I know what those schools are going to do or who's going to ball out for those schools. So take it with a grain of salt. If you have some other podcast or some other video that's going to be able to break those teams down, I highly suggest going to watch them. I'm going to keep doing research leading up to the game. So if I can find something, as always, I'll put it on Twitter or X, whatever you call it now, as well as the show notes here for YouTube. Moving on to the teams that I am going to be stacking up and really favoring. Like I said, I'm going to be trying to ride these favorites and hope that I can get enough from them to just completely wipe out some of these smaller schools and some of these teams that maybe fall behind. I know in DFS, sometimes those schools like San Jose State last week can help you win a slate, but I'm not going to roll the dice there. Hopefully my teams outperform and those guys outperform those dudes. So the schools that I'm going to be prioritizing or the teams in terms of stacking. UCF. John Reese Plumlee returns as the starting quarterback there. You've got Gus Malzahn, and that team is ready to rock and roll moving into the Big 12. This stack is going to be expensive, but I think the one good thing about this slate is you do have some opportunity with smaller schools and some of these depth charts that maybe DraftKings released the pricing before depth charts had dropped. There are some advantages there. There are some cheap pay down guys that we could go bargain hunting and really fill out our lineups if we want to get expensive, which you'll see kind of a common theme when I get to my quarterbacks. So UCF up top for me. NC State, I like quite a bit as well. Mizzou kind of comes in next as far as a team that I have interest in stacking. Arizona State and Tulsa. Those 5 teams I think are going to be kind of the anchors of most of my lineups, and that's who I'm riding with this week on Thursday night's main slate. Moving on to the quarterbacks. These are the guys in my player pool that I have interest in overall. John Reese Plumlee again, UCF. He's expensive at 10-6 up top. I do have some interest in Jalen Rashad at Arizona State. We talked about most of these teams should blow out their competition this week, but being a true freshman, first game starting in college football, not only should they blow this team out that they're playing, but I do expect them to play Rashad a little bit more than they would maybe a seasoned vet who they don't want to get hurt. They need to get this kid some experience and some live snaps. So I expect Rashad, even if they're blowing this team out, for him to stay in this game and play quite a bit before they get to real competition here in a few weeks. So Rashad at 9,800. Braylon Braxton for Tulsa. High-flying offense there for Tulsa. He's 9,500. I have quite a bit of interest in him this week. Brennan Armstrong, the transfer from Virginia, who had a really great, 2021. Absolutely had a stinker of a year last year, 2022. It was a complete disaster and mess, but he is a dual threat guy. He's coming in at 8,900. Interesting player. I have some interest in Brennan Armstrong this week. NC State's just a better program, better team overall. Let's see how he looks. Mitch Griffiths, Wake Forest, takes over for Sam Hartman at 8,300. That offense is still intact. Weapons are still there. They should absolutely trounce South Dakota. They don't play South Dakota. They play Elon. Same thing. They should trounce these guys. I think Mitch Griffiths is in a pretty good spot. When he's played in the past, he has looked fine, and he has put up some numbers. So this is his ship now to run and captain. I think he's a pretty good play this week. Brady Cook for Mizzou. I think this team is heavy favorites. They should absolutely wipe the floor with South Dakota as kind of their tune-up game before heading into some more competitive games, as well as the SEC. He's at 7,900, so Brady Cook is on my radar, and Darren Granger at Georgia State also on my radar. I don't think I'm going below Granger here at 7,400. I think that's going to be kind of my core. I know there's 7 guys there. I'm mostly going to be sticking with Plumlee, Rashada, and then mixing in Braxton, Armstrong, Griffiths, Cook, and Granger with those lineups. So that's kind of how I'm rolling here. Moving on to running back, Cody Schrader, for me, is the highest priced guy that I have interest in. He's at 7K. We talked about Mizzou should actually smack these guys. If it's not going to be Brady Cook in the passing game, Cody Schrader should be heavily involved in the running game. Jaquindon Jackson for Utah is probably my favorite play on the week. Cam Rising, if he doesn't play, it does complicate things, being that the threat of passing is no longer as big of a threat. For Florida, I expect them to load the box and blitz the hell out of this guys with a new quarterback if Rising doesn't play. But Jackson is going to be the bell cow there for him. And Whittington, as we know, is a guy who has no problem with a tough physical fist fight out there in Salt Lake. I expect this game to be kind of low scoring, and it's just going to be a battle and who's tougher. Again, Whittingham has no problem playing that way. He actually probably prefers it. And Jackson's the guy this year that's going to help him do that. Jordan Houston, NC State, 6,400. He should be the bell cow there for those guys. I have some interest in Jermaine Brown Jr., 6,200 for UAB. I think last year he had a fantastic year as kind of a split timeshare with Dwayne McBride, who's now with the Minnesota Vikings. Trent Dilfer comes in, obviously a former NFL quarterback. I expect him to have kind of a pro-style system, and I expect them to lean on Jermaine Brown to kind of start the year to get off to a good start and win this game. 6,200 is a really good price for a guy who could get 15, 20 carries and pop a few in the end zone. Cam Skattebo transferred to Arizona State from Sacramento State, who had a good career the first couple of years there. 5,900. Again, I think Arizona State wants to get off to a great start in the new regime there. Cam Skattebo is going to be the starting running back. 5,900. Good price tag for him. Justice Ellison for Wake, 5,700. He should be the dude there now. Gabe Ervin, he was named the starting quarterback at Nebraska, 5,600 for him. The coaches all came out and said he is clearing away the number one running back for Nebraska, top of the depth chart. We'll see. It's a tough matchup versus Minnesota and PJ Fleck's team, who always plays good defense, plays kind of high and tight, and tries to prevent big plays and things like that. So this one may be kind of more of a fist fight, but he's still going to be the bell cow there and get touches. So 5,600. I think you could do worse. Jordan Ford for Tulsa at 5,300 is the next guy I'm looking at. I talked about Tulsa having blowout potential here. Again, if they're not doing it in the passing game, someone's got to score these points, right? So you're kind of seeing a recurring theme here. Arizona State, Nebraska, or I'm sorry, not Nebraska, Arizona State, Tulsa. Next guy I have is RJ Harvey for UCF at 5,200. Again, I like UCF massively. So does Vegas. But there is a route here where they get down to the goal line, they get inside the 10-yard line, and Plumlee's not the guy who pops these in for passing scores. It's RJ Harvey that steals the show, or Jordan Ford, or Cam Skattebo, or, Cody Schrader. So you kind of see the theme I'm going with here. I'm going to mix and match these guys with the stacks that I'm not going with on the passing game. Braylon Presley is the next guy for Tulsa I have interest in here on DraftKings. So he's listed at 4,600 as a running back, but he is actually the starting slot receiver and going to be used all over the field for Tulsa. He's a transfer from Oklahoma State, super talented guy. I expect him to be heavily involved in this offense right out of the gates. So Braylon Presley is one of my favorite plays at his price point this week. Two guys, if you do want to go down and you do need salary cap savings and you need to go and dive into that bargain bin, Jalen Hampton for Elon is 3,700, starting running back there. Good year last year for Elon. Again, if they're trailing early and it's a tough matchup, he just may not get there just purely on, everything. But at 3,700, it's a good play because he is the starting running back for them. And Travis Thies for South Dakota, same story. 3,300, but he's the dude. If Elon or South Dakota want any shot, they've got to slow down these games and they've got to be able to run the football and hold on to it. So that's their path, right? So if you think that there's a shot that maybe even this game stays close in the first half, let's say, Hampton and Thies have to potentially be considered at their price tag of 3,700 and 3,300. I'm not probably going there, especially a whole lot. But again, if you need some salary cap savings in that kind of final flex spot, not the worst choice in the world. Just say that. Moving on to the receiver position. The one thing DraftKings did do a good job of is pricing the UCF receivers up massively. Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson both returned from last season. They are 8,000 and 7,700. So if you are going to stack UCF, they make it extremely tough to go with both of those guys and double stack this. I think there's a way to do it. We just talked about two running backs below 4K. We're going to talk about multiple receivers that are below 4K you could get into your lineup. But again, you're kind of going with that stars and scrubs route, and you got to kind of hope that those guys pay off if you go that way. So Baker and Hudson are up top. Devon Vele, I have him on here on my list. He gets severely downgraded if Rising is not going to play. Luther Burden is next from Mizzou, highly touted recruit, decided to stay home. He had a good year last year as a true freshman. Now he comes in as probably the number one receiver for Mizzou in a good spot. Xavier Guillory, Arizona State is my top target for Arizona State. Elijah Badger for them is their number one receiver, but he is suspended for the first half of the game. That game could be way out of hand by the time that they get to that point where he comes in. So I don't know what to expect, but I'm not going to be paying really high price for a guy who will not be playing the first half of a game that could be a blowout. So if he beats me in the second half. I don't know. I'm taking my shot on Guillory for ASU at 6,700 and moving on. Ricky Parasol for Florida, 6,600. I think he's in a pretty good spot. Jamal Banks and Taylor Morin for Wake Forest are your two guys at 65 and 62. If you decide to go the Wake Forest route, that's who I'd be looking to stack. Theo Weiss from Mizzou at 5,500. He is a transfer from Oklahoma. I think he's in a pretty good spot here. Again, if you're going to go the Mizzou route, very affordable. Keon Lassan for NC State at 5K. If you're going the NC State route, he's probably their top receiver. I think Chris Autumn-Bell is someone to consider at 5K from Minnesota. We don't really know what to expect from Minnesota. All I know is their quarterback who is taking over is nicknamed the Greek Rifle. Hard to ignore that. So I may have some Chris Autumn-Bell. And I'm on FanDuel, if you're playing there, I do have a lineup with the Greek Rifle. I couldn't exist on a small 4-game slate. I mean, you're going to take your shots on the Greek Rifle, right? Next up, Billy Kemp for Nebraska, a transfer from Virginia, starting slot receiver for them. I could see him catching a lot of footballs to make this offense pretty easy for them. Get the chains moving, some easy completions early on from Jeff Sims. Xavier Townsend for UCF is the third guy that I have some interest in. He's listed on the depth chart as an or starting. 4,800, I think you're taking some shots here, but he's a guy who should see the field. How much of that, I don't know. I don't feel super confident in that, but I am going to have some interest, especially if I'm going to go heavy UCF stacks. I think you could go Baker and Townsend. You could go Hudson and Townsend. You could get a little bit weird here if you want. Porter Rooks for NC State is the other guy. If you're going to pair up with Keon Lassan, he's 4,700, very affordable. Tejon Palmer for UAB. Talked about some of these smaller schools I don't know a lot about, but he's the returning top receiver for them. Very affordable for UAB. Caleb Douglas at 4,500 was listed as a starting receiver for Florida. Very interesting spot there. Then we get down to some bargain bin guys for Arizona State. Giovanni Sanders and Jalen Conyers are both listed as starters for them. They both are expected to be heavily involved, especially with Badger sitting out the first half. These two guys are 4,400 and 4,100, which also cements my liking of the Arizona State stack here. Robert Lewis for Georgia State at 4K. He is a returning player for them, was one of their more consistent players last year. I think if you're going with Granger, he's a great guy to stack up with him. Then we get to Brant Kuthi. We talked about Cam Rising. This guy is also questionable after a knee injury last year. He's going to fill that Dalton Kincaid position for them. He is a damn good player, but we just don't know if he's going to play. So stay tuned. Kyle Whittingham, we'll see what happens there. If he's playing, I'm going to be playing him, but that remains to be seen, obviously. Two guys for Tulsa to keep your eye on: Marquise Shoulders and Devin Williams, 3,300 and 3K. Both of them are listed as starting receivers for this Tulsa offense that has major blowout potential. I don't know how you ignore that. I don't know how chalky these guys are going to be. Just a total mispricing from DraftKings here, but damn, that is tasty. If they hit at 3,300 and 3K and you have them stacked with, let's just say hypothetically UCF, you are in line to have a pretty good night, I think. And then the one guy that I did see the industry kind of getting on, he's not going to escape everybody's eyeballs, is Casey Concepcion for NC State. Deadman, 3K, starting receiver for them. That's another guy that you could pay down for. So as I alluded to, I think you can pay up at quarterback, pay mid-price for running back, because yes, there's good receivers on the slate, but there's a lot of pay down options here. So just keep your eyes on this. Again, these smaller schools, who knows what's accurate and what's not. It's a week one. I'll be doing my best to retweeting and posting things that I see as they come out leading up to kickoff and lock on Thursday night. So follow me on Twitter or X at the Notorious VJL. More than happy to share thoughts as well, work back and forth with you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or on there. And let's hope Kyle Whittingham doesn't screw us all like he usually does. That's it for the show, everyone. Good luck Thursday night. Don't forget to subscribe, thumbs up, review, and let's go get that money.